Jeff the Killer is a story that follows a 13-year-old boy named Jeff who experiences strange feelings of anger that he cannot truly explain, a feeling to hurt people. The story begins with a news article that follows a case where a teenage boy and his father were attacked by, you guessed it, Jeff the Killer. The following follows Jeff and his family from a third-person viewpoint. Jeff and his family are moving to a suburban neighborhood that is relatively nice after his father gets a new job. Nothing is truly discussed from their old life or what his father's job even is. Jeff's mother meets the neighbor Donna, who invites Jeff's mother, Jeff's father, and Louie, Jeff's brother, to her son's birthday party. Jeff complains because he is 13 and doesn't want to go to a child's birthday party, which, if you guessed it, is teenage angst. The next morning, while going to school, Jeff is confronted by 3 bullies, but the only one you really need to remember is Randy, the main bully. He tells Jeff and Louie to fork over their lunch money, and when Louie refuses, Randy pulls out a knife and threatens to stab Jeff and Louie. Jeff gets a strange feeling to hurt, or possibly just an overwhelming feeling of protection for his older brother, who he clearly very much loves. Jeff stabs the bullies and runs off with his brother to school. When they return home, cops arrive to arrest one of the boys after the bullies had outed both Jeff and Louie as being the boys who beat them up. Louie is the one who confesses because he does not want to see Jeff go to jail. This causes Jeff to, understandably, become a reserved person and causes him to isolate himself. The day of the party comes and Jeff goes, being isolated from all the other children, until Randy shows up with his 2 henchmen, you could say, who happen to get a hold of guns and threaten Jeff with them. As Jeff and Randy fought, scaring the shit out of all the children at the party, Randy sets Jeff on fire. Jeff passes out and awakes in a hospital. His skin is described to be a leathery white and black hair. When he is discharged and gets home, his mental state falls apart, and he cuts off his own eyelids and cuts a smile into his face. He says he does this to look at his beautiful face forever, and he kills his parents and his brother, and thus the story ends. The story, like I said, really begins when Jeff and his family move to a new suburban neighborhood, which makes the bullies even more unrealistic. I've lived in both ghetto areas, you could say, and currently live in an area that is described to be where Jeff lives. The only place I've ever seen bullies as violent and crazy as these ones were the ones at ages 16 to 18 and in the bad parts of places. Never did they live in the suburban area. But there were the occasional bad kids in the area, but none of them carried fucking guns. Jeff is described to have an odd feeling, and he doesn't truly act on it till Louie is being bullied. But there are really only 2 instances where Jeff feels these feelings, at breakfast and during the fight. I would like to point out this could have been worked on and made into something more supernatural in Jeff's character, as the character is seen to be one of the big ones in the creepypasta fan base. But it was really never explained, and I think it was only there to make it seem like he was born to be an insane killer, or something like that, I guess. I just never got the reason for the odd feeling even being mentioned. Now, the leathery skin thing, it just made me laugh at the story, because if you were to be set on fire, you would look more like Freddy Krueger, the burns scarring your body, making you unrecognizable, and third-degree burns. Jeff would have died from the injuries, as most people who are burned that badly do not live on. He would either have committed suicide from the immense amount of pain, or died from the wounds. On top of all of this, no hospital would ever release a burn victim of that severity after 1 fucking day. Most stay for months and months on end, and Jeff seems to have been seen as supernatural in a way, I guess. He seems to be able to appear in the boys at the beginning of the story room even though the window was closed, but again, this could have been expanded on and maybe made into an interesting concept, but once again, nothing was truly turned into anything unique and truly interesting, but instead is one of the most cliche stories. Now, I do know that bullying can drive people to complete and utter insanity at times, but that is usually after years and years of isolation on top of the bullying. Jeff spent, from what I've read, less than a month in isolation. The story is rushed, cliché, and just unrealistic. And because of all these problems, it isn't scary in the slightest. People in the Jeff the Killer fan base have completely sexualized Jeff the Killer. I admit, I wrote some creepypasta smut, but simply because 1, people like it, and 2, I'm kind of good at writing it. But that's when I'm using the sexualized version of Jeff. Jeff was transformed from a crazy serial killer to an anime character that people wanted to fuck. Oh, did I mention he was 13 in the original story? There's some really amazing fan art. There are some incredibly talented fans, but I don't believe they should waste their talent on such a concept. This piece right here I think is well done, and I think it's kind of cool actually. Sadly, people have used this image to use for their fanfics. Oh, that's also a thing people do. They write fanfictions of him fucking the reader. Now, I've done this, but again, like I said, I did it really because I knew people would like it, and I like to put my creativity into something people would like, not necessarily something I would like. Oh, and I was also 14, so fucking shut up. Now this picture, this is something else. The artist seems like a good artist, and I'm sure they are much better to this day, but the drawing itself is just kind of creepy when you look at the origin story. But in all honesty, it's a pretty average fan base. They do what most fan bases do. The only thing I very strongly disagree with is the sexualized images of Jeff as he is 1, 13, and 2, the story wasn't even that good. Now, while this story was at its peak, so many Mary Sues were made. An example would be Nina the Killer. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to make OCs, but Lord knows I have when I was 13. But there's a line between copying and taking inspiration. The Jeff the Killer story blew up in the creepypasta fandom, and honestly is one of the most famous creepypasta characters alongside of Slender Man, which is kind of sad to see. I hope the author has improved, and I don't necessarily know how the author reacts to when people criticize his creation, but this was, well, my video, my script, and my thoughts on the Jeff the Killer story. And again, I will admit, when I was a little 13-year-old Fei-Fei, I did enjoy the story, and I did, in fact, even make fan art and fan fictions, but at this time, I currently don't really do that, because I grew up and I realized different things. And that's usually what happens with people in fandoms like this. They make shitty fan art, shitty fanfics. Sometimes they make really good fan fictions, really good fan art, but over a shitty concept. And, well, you know the rest. All of the Jeff the Killer story was just bland, boring, and unrealistic. I again think it could have been improved upon, like, for example, the feeling that Jeff gets, but it was only mentioned ever twice. There could have been a much more supernatural substance into the story. There could have been a much more real issue about what bullying does to a person and what isolation does to a person. There could have been so many things expanded upon in this story. And I would honestly love to see a rewrite of the story, to see it rewritten and made into something way more unique. But that is for neither here nor there. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. It would make my day. If you have any thoughts on the Jeff the Killer story, if you agree, disagree, go ahead and leave them in the comments down below, or tell me any other stories you'd like to see me review. And if you like content like this, go ahead and subscribe, because Faith reviews will be either on Wednesdays or Fridays. And as always, stay freaky, my little freaks. I will see you later.